Hello and welcome to Everything I Did Wrong as a Church Planter, a million-part series. My name is Logan Wolf, and I am a church planter. My wife, Grayson, and I moved to Provo, Utah in 2011 as church planters, and our ministry has taken so many different forms and shapes over the last, almost 13 years now. We have been a mobile church, meeting in the conference center of a hotel. We have navigated a church merger, become multi-site overnight, staff, buildings, two different counties. And then even more recently, for the last 5 years almost, we have put that structure and have been functioning as a network of house churches across the state of Utah. And so with this podcast, I have just been looking back over that experience, reflecting on it, and basically just talking through what I would do differently if I was in those same circumstances, pursuing those same courses of action, as well as just what I would do differently, just knowing what I know now and how that might look. And for the last several episodes, I've been bringing on some friends, some other church planters from across the country, letting them share their experiences and their mistakes with us. And our purpose in doing that is basically to encourage you, not to be a discouragement or dissuade you from maybe the church planting journey, but to just save you some of the frustration and the heartache and the headaches and the time and energy and money maybe that we feel like we went through ourselves looking back on it. So that is the case today. I'm joined by another brother, someone you've actually have heard a time or two before. This is Isaac Morin joining us from California. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. I didn't. So we're friends now, is what I'm
Oh my
gathering.
gosh.
Finally,
Okay,
finally made the cut.
I'm
Very
not this
excited.
it just now. You got yeah, we got such
Very
a
excited.
jerk. You're such a jerk. I'm in the process of recording basically a batch of interviews. And so I've got a couple under my belt this week. I've got Isaac right now. I've got my wife Grayson's going to jump on one so we can wrap up this last season. But Isaac and I are recording this. This won't post until later, I'm aware, like after the new year, but it is Christmas Eve. The afternoon of Christmas Eve, and we are having this conversation. So what a wonderful gift to you. So,
Oh well,
so
you're
I'm in.
welcome.
Okay. All right. So here's what we're going to discuss. You guys have heard some of Isaac's story in the past. If you're jumping on, maybe this is one of the first episodes you've listened to, or you've listened to several. It's been a little bit since Isaac's been on. You can go back to some of those past episodes and kind of hear his faith story and how he got into church planting, what that has looked like. There's a lot of parallels, not identical, but a lot of parallels in his journey and mine, where we're at. Completely different context, but the journeys are very similar. What we wanted to talk about today is basically that the setup once we had begin meeting publicly. And so, and by the setup, I just mean physically, practically, how we were setting up and utilizing our spaces. What did that look like? Where we were meeting, and then even how we're utilizing other volunteers, leaders, navigating, or maybe the failure to do those things, navigating, using that space for various parts of the ministry. And so I believe, Isaac, you and I both were in the situation where we were setting up and tearing down week in and week out. So maybe just by introduction, just kind of jump in, tell us where you guys ended up meeting once you were meeting on a weekly basis, what that looked like, and then just how you were that whole pack up setup kind of process, what that looked like. Don't jump into the volunteers yet, because I want to share a little bit of my story as well. But go ahead and explain what you guys were doing.
Yeah. So, again, I can't remember if I referenced this or not. So this is relevant, right? When we planted, we were kind of handed this small gathering of people in Santa Ana, and their pastor left about a month or two after we were there. So something we were bringing into this was a complete removal from a storefront and placing people into a mobile setup. And the fact that they're losing their pastor, right?
Yeah.
There's some things at play here. Part of this had connection with support promised that did not become support delivered, which led us to leave the storefront and seek something just a little bit more affordable. So the good news was we found a gym location that was pretty centered in the spot of the city we were planting in. And the other piece of good news was it was only $500 a month. The reason it was only $500 a month because it was just a shelled out, really empty, cold, drafty gym, or hot, depending on the time of year. So what we looked like, and this was probably for the first 6 years of our ministry, is we had to protect the floor. We had to provide, obviously chairs. There's some power, but there's no production capability. And you're talking about a back classroom and a stage and another office space for anything you wanted to do with kids. So our weekly setup comprised of three 36-foot long rolls of carpet. It looked like an entire square cage system of pipe and drape system that we set up every week. Under this, we're routing HDMI and cable cords for 2 TVs that we walked in. Of course, you had to put those up on something, right? So initially we started with like this, not plywood, but like a box structure that we built for 2 TVs and would put them on top of there. Then in the back, we would set up a table for like books and reading material, or like pseudo library that would have your bulletins and your brochures and all your sign up sheets. Then you'd have another table for like snacks and donuts and coffee, which by the way was all brought in by people that might do that, right? So coffee's made
I
every
want
Sunday.
to interrupt you because I did not realize you were printing bulletins. Like you were much more conservative, traditional than I, because you were printing bulletins.
So, and a part of that, right, is I'm going to FedEx on Sunday morning prior to all the setup, picking up the connection cards and the bulletins that were printed. We had the giving envelopes and the pins, all there in a bin. We would get there, had somebody put them out, on the table. Then, of course, you've got the back table for like the media, right? So the laptops, you got 2 laptops that are running. You've got stuff for recording the audio, recording the video. So wiring to support all of this. We're not bringing any internet into this, so everything we're doing in terms of that aspect of production is something else to do after you're done with Sunday, to go and upload it on SoundCloud or I don't even think Spotify was a thing then, but anyways, right? So every week and then you've got nursery, right? So everything for nursery, you got the corral for the kids that you got to set up. You got all the toys that you're kind of constantly changing out because you don't want the kids to get too bored with the same toys all the time. You've got fill out sheets, you've got sign up sheets, you got waiver forms, you got all this stuff just for nurseries and babies. Then you've got all the stuff for like a kids class, right? And these are all bins, and we had 4 compartments, because you had chairs, right? So we had 100 chairs. So you got a bin for the chairs. And all these things were, what we did is we built a dolly system that was like 3/4-inch plywood on these, what are they, those wheels, right? From, what's the name of that store? It's like a hardware store anyways, like Ace Hardware or something like that. Bolted it all, put some rope on it. And so we had 4 probably 25-foot sleds that we would pull out every single week and spend about an hour setting all this stuff out. And honestly, an hour is pretty impressive when you put all the stuff together, right? Because the nursery is on a platform, it's in a classroom, then you've got the kids' class in another space, then you got this whole pipe and drape system getting put up. And
are you storing all this at the gym? Where are you storing this stuff?
We stored it at the gym. Okay. So when we got done, we'd pack it all back down and roll it back up under into these 4 stalls. And we had pianos, right? So we're assembling a piano on Sunday morning. We're breaking it down. We're putting it away, all this sort of stuff. So, and then that's not even stuff that you're bringing with you that's not going to stay there, right? Like guitars, some of the music stands. Your computers obviously aren't staying there. And all this is a probably, I don't know, mile or 2 drive from our house, which was nice. Wasn't too bad. But yeah, man, I mean, that was, and look, and the thing is like, there were probably, I think the most people we ever had for a setup crew was probably 6 people setting all that up. So in 45 minutes. Now, everybody was down to kind of help once church was over. Like they just packed stuff up and put it away. It went relatively quick. But it was just, man.
Wow.
And we did that for a real long time, So yeah. So anyways, that was our story of our setup church. So
Okay. So we were also a mobile church. So that's how we started. So you looked like you went from a storefront into more of the mobile church setup. We
yeah.
started there. We actually, when we moved to Utah, we hit up a bunch of places looking for space to meet. Schools wouldn't let us in. The convention centers were too expensive. Hindsight, it wasn't too expensive. I was just cheap. I've talked about that previously.
Yeah.
And then I looked at a couple hotels, and sometimes like one of them was like trying to push us into their business center, which is like it's a conference table in there. It's like, how's this going to work? And we ended up at a Best Western, which it got bought out to Baymont Inn and Suites now. Um, but it has a conference center with its separate entrances, and which was nice, and its own separate parking lot. So you didn't have to go
Oh,
through the
yeah.
hotel to get into it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't enormous. I mean, I think the capacity was like 165 people was what the fire code thing on it said. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So I mean you could fill it up. I liked it because it had those built-in dividers. So you could essentially you could
Oh,
pull across.
yeah.
So you could essentially split this rectangular room into thirds. And then each of those thirds had its separate entrance.
Hmm.
And so you could do now. That's not how we didn't utilize that, which is so stupid. So here's what they let us. They had all the chairs there, those padded like conference center chairs.
Yeah.
So we just had to pull those out and arrange those how we wanted, but we didn't have to pack in chairs. And then they had a projector screen, and so we didn't have money like designated for our startup stuff, but someone did buy us a really nice projector.
Nice.
And so we had the projector, which I would hook to the laptop, and we do our slides and everything up there. And then they had one of those podiums, but it was like one of those tabletop podiums. So it wasn't like a
Yeah.
standing podium. It had to sit on the table. So up front, we'd have this table, an 8-foot table and the podium, and then the projector and the laptop next to that. And then, of course, I mean, you could probably tell by the way this podcast works. I don't know anything about tech stuff. And so I've got this separate Zoom audio recorder. Have you seen those Zoom audio recorders? They've got the little
Uh,
uh,
no, no.
no, they're cool. Anyway, so I have the separate recorder. I don't need a microphone because the room's not I mean, it's not
Yeah.
so big that you need a microphone. So there's all this kind of stuff kind of cluttered up front, projector, laptop, Zoom recorder, podium, my notes, all this kind of stuff, and then the
Yeah.
screen behind me, and then the chairs just lined up in rows. Front, initially that grand opening service, we're set up for a ton of people,
Yeah.
but and 14 like it's like ridiculous. And the people that come, they're going to sit in the very back, and you've made the mistake of putting the row, the rows like the room's full. But then we did. So here's also something ridiculous. So you talk about bringing in instruments and packing in instruments. We did that eventually later. Those first, well, at least past that first year, we had no music,
Oh,
which I think
wow.
is the dumbest.
Yeah.
Like it was, yeah, because it was like not like no singing of any kind. I didn't even try to lead from like a cassette or something, or cassette. Oh my gosh, how old are we? Like from like
Record player in the
there
back.
was real there was MP3s and CDs were a real thing. Cassettes were out by the time we launched, but
Yeah,
uh,
but that's too edgy. Right? That's tampering
so
some
it
stuff
is like,
that
well, come on now. So no music, and our service. We did have a table in the back too, like you said, and we didn't serve coffee because of Utah, but we had
right.
donuts and whatnot, and then
Yeah.
Bibles and tracts and stuff like that. We did
Yeah.
connection cards, all that kind of stuff. And then outside, we down by the road, they would let us put an A-frame sign the night before. So Saturday afternoon, we'd go and put an A-frame sign out by the road.
Yeah. So sorry, you're reminding me, there's another portion of this. We
Yeah.
also had 6 A-frame signs that would also need to get put out at various corners that morning.
You think you're better? You're 6 times better, I guess, than
No, 6 times dumber, right? We would go put these things out. So, and the thing about putting them out the morning of was because we were not even kind of sure, we were almost positive the A-frames would get stolen.
bro. We had ours stolen.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, every sign we put out has been stolen. Like, so we had the A-frames, and those are the more expensive ones. And I am grateful, eventually someone else stepped up outside of Utah and was buying those for us.
Yeah.
But we also had some of those yard signs. You know,
Oh, yeah,
the
sure.
so the A-frame's out by the big intersection, the road, and then in the parking lot, because it's a business complex. So
Yeah.
navigating parking, we had signs with arrows just kind of pointing to
Right.
where the park.
Yes.
And then we had this banner that hung across the outside of the conference center with the church name. So
Right.
I mean, that was kind of the extent of our signage. And even looking back on it, I wish I had had someone else design it, put it together. I mean, it looked bad. I mean, I've
Yeah.
shown pictures, I think, and like on the YouTube. If you're listening to this, you've not seen any pictures, but if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, you have seen some of the pictures from our setup. And so I'll drop some of those in this one too. But I mean, it wasn't anything great. It was awful. So we're packing all this. We don't have to pack up chairs or anything, but we have these two boxes and basically just like I mean they're like 3 by maybe 2.5 by 2.5 cubes, and you open
Yeah.
them and we're just like putting like everything inside, all the Bibles and books and stuff inside, the projectors inside, the tablecloth, the table drape fronts inside. And you know, we try to get fancy down the road, like we used to do like those pop-up signs up front with our sermon series.
Yes.
Or I think even before that we had like the easels, you know, the art easels, and we had
Yes.
printed like on cork board or foam board,
Yeah.
like the poster from the
Yeah.
again, it's like 10 people in there. They don't stinking care. Like it's the dumbest thing that they're
Yeah.
spending money on. But you feel like because you come into this room and it's like, what
Yeah.
like you got to try to make it church.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of our generic setup. No music, no instruments for a year. That's not like a conviction thing. That was just stupidity. And we're in this huge, technically a huge space, 160 people. There's a
Oh, yeah.
dozen of us eventually in one corner. Stupid.
Yeah.
All right, I'm curious. Hindsight, before we start talking about how we're utilizing the space with volunteers and different aspects of the ministry, hindsight, what would you have done different with your setup? What would you tell someone who's in a similar spec? Like just the whole thing. If you're looking back on it, it's like I wish I'd done this differently. I'd want someone to know, hey, if you've got a space like this, don't do this. Don't waste your time, your money, or actually you should have done this, and maybe point them in that direction.
Yeah, it's
I've
hard
got a
to say
bunch of
'cause
things.
yeah, because at this point it's kind of like, hey, for me, probably meeting in a gym is probably not a great idea, right?
Okay.
Um, and just thinking about because I can take you back to what my mindset was right during that time. It was like it wasn't like I was ignorant of the amount of work that was going to have to go into Sunday. It was just it's not even it's I mean certainly it's worth it. Like are the 13 years of what I've gone through and experienced worth it? Absolutely, right? We're chasing down making disciples for the kingdom, right? It's worth it. Um, but it was also this idea of like, yeah, it's hard work and I don't mind doing the hard work, right? And look, I'm a veteran, right? So I've got like two things working against me. I had the like missional, kind of like we need to reach people for Jesus, coupled with like if it's hard, you're doing it right, kind of thing going on, right?
Wow.
So it was. I don't think there was a lot of assessment on is there maybe a better cost benefit analysis here on the amount of work we're about to do for Sundays,
Yeah.
on what, and I don't mean from like a profit margin or anything like that, just from the standpoint of like, okay, here's what we're trying to do.
Right.
Here's
So
the
you're talking the actual energy and effort and setting up and tearing down. And you said it was $500 a month.
Yeah, so right, so that's
Okay.
great.
Yeah.
Cost
Okay.
wise, great. The amount of work wise, though, I mean, if it takes 6, 7 people 45 minutes to an hour to get ready for services, and then you still got some ancillary stuff to get done, like picking up printing and breakfast and putting out signs and stuff. Yeah, there should have been I would say, like, if someone's moving in that sort of situation, I would say, hey, think a little bit harder. Maybe not, maybe the location's the right location, right? But what amount of work is appropriate for the return that I can get out of this building, right? Because at the end of the day, right, it's a gym. Like
Right.
there was nothing I could do to make that place less drafty, less gymmy, right? It's a gym. Now we had to protect the floors, but there was probably a way for me to do that with some chair modifications rather than three 36-foot by 12-foot rolls of carpet. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Also, I think the pipe and drape is helpful But at the same time, that's a lot of stuff to do, right?
Yeah.
So there's a portion of which we could have thought a little bit more about the amount of work we're putting into this versus what we could ultimately make this place feel like. And
Right.
and then of course you have the whole cost associated with all of that. As bad as that was, we still spent $1,000 on all the chairs. We spent probably $3,000 on the pipe and drape system. We had the wood and stuff going into all the things that we were dragging out, all the toys we spent the money on for the kids program, all the weekly printing that we did, you know,
Wow.
thousands of dollars trying to, and we did all the same stuff. We printed sermon series specific banners. We did 24 by 36-inch foam boards
You know, and
on,
I did that because I saw other churches doing that.
yeah, that
Like, I
we
don't think
had
it was,
buildings.
yeah,
And
people
so
in the buildings were doing that. That's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, and so it's just one of those things where it's like I don't think the building was wrong. I mean, you start where you start, right? I mean, a good church planner can make church, I think, anywhere. That's part of being a
Oh
good
yeah,
church.
I'm not.
I mean, but yeah, at the same time, there could have been, hey, we could have been saving a lot of this money towards some future space that we could have had, and or maybe looking to bring on more of a full-time musician at that point, because we had people that were doing music. I was a part of the music, but they were very intermittent because they were college students that were coming down right from our school. So
Yeah.
we could have been backlogging some funds during that time that would have made a little bit more sense, instead of trying to, and if you would have asked me then, am I trying to make this gym less Jimmy? No, not necessarily, but I was in a sense trying to convey future direction, some vision by what we're doing. And all of that sort of stuff is a little silly. When you look at what really leads to growth in churches, that stuff's really silly. And I would not
Right.
at this point now, right? I'm going to argue, because somebody out there listening to this is going to be arguing with me in their head about, no, you're right. You should be casting vision with what you purchase and how you present the ministry. And I'm not really going to disagree with you on that, but it's secondary to leadership development. I'm going to tell you, the right guy and the right family that's going to help you lead the church into the future will not care about that stuff, right? They
Right.
will be mission vision centered, and so they will have the capacity to overlook where we're at versus where we're going, right?
And you said something, and I think this is noteworthy. Is you can make church happen. I'm using air quotes here. Make church happen in any
Yeah,
space.
right.
I just think you need to make the space conducive to what you're trying to accomplish. Like
Yes.
I do think, I mean, in our situation when it was just, that first year it's just me and my wife, a gymnasium would have been super is it unconducive, inconducive, not
In,
conducive. It's just
yeah,
not
not
conducive
yeah.
to,
I'm from
because you
Georgia.
can
I know.
imagine this. You got this huge gymnasium, you got these chairs set up, pushed into a corner, and there's two people sitting up there. And it's,
Right.
John Doe walks in for the first time. It's like that is
Yeah.
not a welcoming environment.
Yeah.
It's not so I do think you've got to, whatever space you find yourself in, it's particularly, we're talking about mobile church space. You can make work, but you just also need to make it a welcoming environment that actually
Yeah.
allows you to facilitate what is the most important things, what you're talking about, what
Yeah.
is important, what a church has to be doing. And that involves, we're proclaiming the word and we're worshiping, and we are developing people, particularly leaders, to lead out ministry, equipping them to that end. So those things have to be able to take place in a way that's not, the environment's not distracting.
Yeah.
The environment we were in, bro, super distracting to that. Was
Yeah.
not.
Well,
I mean, I don't know. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, you guys had it was in a Best Western Conference room.
So yeah, convent is the center. So it wasn't like it was
Oh,
set up like it was a bigger space. It
yeah.
wasn't like their business center, and it was separate entrance. But here's what happened every once in a while. So talk about, and again, this was just part of it, and we could have made, I don't know. I let some of it bother me. Every once in a while, you'd have someone walk in thinking that's where the continental breakfast was. So
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
and it's, you can only say we're just feasting on the word so many times before,
Well, hey,
it's
we
like,
I mean, we
come
would
on.
have people roll in about to play
I
basketball
was like, what do you
that
guys
would
do?
walk in and be like, "Oh, there's like
Oh.
there's a church going on in here," like it's funny.
So there was that, and of course down the road, we cashed in on the fact we were in a hotel. We actually asked the hotel if we could, stick invitations in all the hotel rooms where they keep the Gideon Bibles in the dressers.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so we actually had
Nice.
an invitation printed up specifically for that that said, I don't know, something like just down the hall, like just down the
Yeah.
hall, like literally or something like
Which
that. And it
that's a
was
great idea, right? Because if
it
someone's traveling, they're
yeah.
out of town on a Sunday, they're like, "Oh, I normally go to church. I'll
I'll
go.
jump
I
in here.
got one at
I
here." Yeah,
and we did. We got people from all over the country passing through that would just
that's
jump in.
really
I
cool.
wish hindsight. I wish we were in a place where I was focused more on equipping people instead of just monologuing at them. And they dip out. We never had any contact with them again
You
because I
wish
feel
you
like
were?
I wish I had equipped more because if there are people like taking the time on their business trip or vacation or coming to visit someone at college and they're jumping in on our service, I wish I would have had the frame of mind to equip them to go back
Yeah,
to wherever they were going. And
yeah, and that's a great point too, because any ministry leader deals with this. People are at your church on vacation,
right,
and I think the tendency is to be like, "Oh, great, thanks for being here. I'm
see
never
ya.
thinking about you again," right?
Yeah,
Whereas, and I think maybe especially in your space, right? Like these people are actually seeking out spiritual encouragement and
yeah,
information while they're on vacation. Like
yeah.
they're probably a pretty strong,
I
person.
would think so. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it would have been cool, man. See, it would have been cool even to develop. This is an aside, isn't it? But that could have been a bridge to a relationship with the church in another city, another state. And who knows what God could have done through it? But you're right. We
yeah.
kind of view those as
Well,
one-offs. We never.
you're
You're
building
pressed. You're
you're
right
pressing.
there. And
Yeah, yeah,
so again,
you're
and our
pressing into the church,
space was
right?
so we had that happen initially. People popping in. Sounds like you did too. We also it's a space others were able to rent on days other than Sunday. And so we had a couple instances. I don't know if I've told you these stories before or not. So we've had an instance where a bachelorette party rented at one time,
Oh
and we
wow.
came in and right before the service, we're coming to set up. Right before the service, the whole place, all over the floor, is genitalia shaped glitter, and like so
Wow.
we couldn't find the maintenance guy wasn't there that day, so we couldn't unlock the closet where the vacuum was. So me and like three other people are on our hands and knees scraping up all the all this.
I've got
We
a
got
handful
we
of
got hands full
genitalia.
of these penises, and it's ridiculous, man. So we did that, and then the other one that makes me think where someone else rented it ahead of us is it was a Mormon family reunion, and we come in, and they must have been using it even that Sunday or I don't know, maybe they just bailed out and didn't clean it up. But
Yeah.
all around on every wall, they had these poster boards with scripture verses from the Book of Mormon.
Oh wow.
And so we're there to set up for church, and this Book of Mormon verses all. I mean, so we just pulled it all down.
Yeah, and oddly enough,
So
genitalia shaped glitter.
well, no, there you go. So it was crazy. So there was stuff like, but then I think even the way we set it up, though, we should have used these dividers, I think, more to kind of create that more intimate space as we were smaller. And because
Right.
literally, it's not. Here I am saying it'd be ridiculous in the gym, but it was ridiculous in this conference center. You'd walk in this big conference center,
Yeah.
and we're tucked over here in one area,
Yeah.
and it just feels like. So you got someone walking in, it's almost like the shock, like, oh, it's a big space. Oh, there's only two people.
So you guys
Uh,
never really did the pipe and drape thing to close in the room.
we did not.
Yeah.
So I wish like at one point we did use one of the dividers for some kid stuff on the other side. I
Yeah.
kind of wish, looking back at this is the dumbest thing. I wish we just closed both dividers. So right off the bat, split the room into threes,
Right.
utilize the fact that they all have separate entrances, and
Yeah.
there's a bathroom at the other. So if you need the bathroom, you just come out the one entrance and go into the bathroom entrance, and
Right.
basically had a kids class separate
Yeah.
entrance check-in kind of thing.
Yeah. Kids are this way.
The kids
Right.
are this
Yeah.
way, adults are this way, maybe teens or something else, some
Right.
kind of ministry over here, and just go ahead and have it. I mean, and it was all broke. Okay, ours was $75 a week,
Oh wow. Yeah.
so it's costing us nothing, and they're providing the chairs,
Yeah. That's
and and so we have this set up, and I really wish we had availed ourselves of the space. So again, looking back, like, so I heard a quote. I've quoted it a number, it was years ago, but some guy says, when you talk about ministry and stuff, before you try, like, we need to buy something, we need to build bigger, we need to get this. Have you maximized what you have?
Oh right. Yeah.
And looking back at that, I heard that quote, and then I went and asked the hotel about advertising in the rooms, which I thought, hey, we're in a hotel, let's maximize this. But the
Yeah.
actual space itself, I don't feel like we utilize
Yeah.
that in its full capacity before jumping into, because right after that was the church merger, and then now we've got huge bills. huge
Right.
bills. And
Yeah.
here at $75 a week, we did not maximize ministry
Yeah.
there. I
And
hate
well,
that.
the interesting thing too, though, is like with yours, because it's funny, right? Because we could talk about, okay, so we were piping and draping this huge, massive, gym, and again, we're in Orange County, right, which is kind of a little bit of a Bible Belt of Southern California, right? And so ours never really felt like I don't think we ever cast off that vibe with people. But it is funny to think, right? Like even in your space, it might have even done the same thing just by virtue of like the culture in Utah, right? Because now it's not just now you're compartmentalizing the families, which might be a problem for
Right,
people in
right.
Utah, right? Like, hey, what are you doing?
Yeah,
While for people that don't know you, right?
yeah.
Whereas like in our space, it was like I think the problem for us was the culture isn't an affluent culture, right? So while we were doing good, not being off-putting, we were none of the chairs had padding. They were all those black plastic,
Yeah.
cheap chairs, right? So there was this. We did good from an aesthetic standpoint, but the problem was you're in the average cost of a home around us at this time, right? This is 2011 was probably somewhere around $650,000.
Hmm.
So you got 85% of people with a BA or higher, very affluent area, high cost of living, and you're trying to get people to come into this startup gym, and often we'd have people canvass and be like, yeah, come back by when you've got 100 people. Well, I'm not, because you're that person, but what they were saying was steeped in a very true reality for that area, right?
Right.
Because they know. I think they know the fail statistics rates, but they also know it's going to be a lot of work. There's going to be some uncomfortableness, and yeah, sure, we can spend all day making the argument. Well, you got to sacrifice for Jesus. The reality is we were inviting people into something that was a little dumb, from the standpoint
See,
of
and that's how I look.
right.
Yes, I look on it. It's like, would I show up here?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Okay, I would be honest with you. I look back at those first few years. No, I would
Right.
not roll in there with my family.
Yeah.
And I'm a
Yeah.
Christian.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like I get that. Like there is again, I go back. If you're going to go that route, you need to think through those things, and you can't just think,
Yes.
well, it'll it's a church
Yeah.
plant. They'll understand, or because they won't,
Right.
or it's enough that we love God. That'll okay. But that doesn't not for the unbeliever. So I think there's things to actually
Sure.
think through in that actual presentation
Yeah.
of the space that you're going into. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I wonder. Okay, because we were talking about this before we hit record. There are quote unquote ministries. I guess they're businesses. They're not. I mean, you're paying them. They're not ministries
Oh, yeah.
where they will help you with all this pack up, set up, tear down, design your space when you're in a rented, borrowed space week in and week out. The one that I'm aware of, and there's others. I don't know if you're aware of others to mention. Is just the portable church industries. You've heard of them?
Yeah.
Okay. They'll again, I've never used them. Hindsight, I wish I had someone because we were taking and we didn't get to leave all of our stuff there. We were jamming it in a minivan after the service, which
Yeah.
wasn't as a big deal initially when it was just those couple boxes, but eventually we did add a piano and guitars and some different things. And we had to bring our own screen because we did swing the room and
Yeah.
so there was a lot more. And again, we're just slamming it in the van. We didn't have kids at that time. If we had kids now, we could not have done that. So I wish I had someone to kind of look at the space and maybe even from a standpoint of what's welcoming and say, hey, what if we did this? What if we set it up this way? What if you framed it this way? What if you oriented it this way?
Yeah.
And then those, at least portable church, from what I understand, designs boxes and containers to put all that stuff in a very specific A, B, C setup, tear down, and it goes back in the same order you take it out, and it kind of takes the headache away.
Yeah.
What have you seen? Anything else like that you've seen or you're aware of?
Yeah. I think any guy that goes the route that we did eventually starts Googling things like that, right? Like,
How can I make this easier?
why am I doing this to myself? What are better options? Or just like, you have other friends that are planting and they reference something like that. Oh, I found this resource, and you're like, what?
Why can I do
I
that?
know about this, And so you go online and yeah, there's probably tons of companies out there that do this now. I think they're beneficial, right? Like it's one of those things where if you can, so I would say, yeah, because if you just having someone to talk through
The setup.
your plan and
Yeah.
your idea of how the setup's going to go would be worth at least talking to a company to go through their whatever their options are, right? Because like you said, right, they usually have like an ABC package or a D pack, like whatever. And this isn't it's not like ABC, good, better, best or anything. It's usually sides, I think, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're planning a launch and you're looking to jump out the gate with like 500 people, this is what you need, right? Or if
Yeah.
you're looking around 100, this is what you need. If you're going to Utah in a conference room, then this is what you need, right? And
Yeah.
so it's just, but so I think just having the conversation with one of those guys would be beneficial just to have the conversation.
Well, see, and I wish no one gave us any input on anything we were doing. And again, I think it's one of the shortcomings with kind of how we got out to Utah is so when we came to this space, it was just kind of left up to me and Grayson. Like,
Yeah.
this is how we'll set up. It would have been great to have another voice saying, or set up this way, like give us some,
Yeah.
pushback on what we were
Well,
doing.
and then backtrack too, right? This 2011. I don't even know how many companies like that there were,
Right.
right?
And I don't know, I didn't come across Portable Church in 2011.
Yeah.
I can't, but we were still in the conference center when I heard of it. I imagine it was cost prohibitive for what at that time for us, just because I feel like it's something there's value in it. I would have
Yeah.
used something like that,
So,
but I was super cheap. And again, that's a mistake. If you're going to go the traditional route, you've got to spend money. I was
yeah.
super cheap and I didn't do it. But again, it raises the question: how much is your time worth? How much is your energy worth? Is that what I want to? Is that what I want to tie volunteers up in doing, or is there other more valuable tasks volunteers could be doing?
Yeah.
So
And really, that's where I think you're going to land the most benefit from those types of companies because odds are, at least for most of the stories I read, most of those companies were started by guys that at some level had either went to plant or they were a part of a plant and they were just familiar with the headaches, right? And so they usually were guys that would be able to walk you through some of the stuff that you should be anticipating with the pains of setup, right? And with the pains of small church stuff, and especially with mobile church. So yeah, I agree. Like our sending pastor, like he came up and we walked through the building and he kind of helped shape how we initially presented it to the city, which I thought was really, really good. Like the way we set it up, I thought it was the best it could be for a gym. And I didn't come up with the ideas. Like most of the stuff that we did, I took from him because he had done a mobile thing, like he had planted, and so it was beneficial for us. So if you're going to talk about one of those companies, I think one of the best advantages they could provide is perhaps some lens. But you need to ask that question, right?
right.
You need to know, hey, how did this company get started? Who are you? What's your relationship to church planting? And maybe not even the owner, right? But maybe the guy that you're consulting with, because if this guy has no experience in planting, no experience in mobile church, no experience with church planting pains, then give the guy the credit for the sell, but go talk to somebody else in that company that's actually got some like on the ground experience, just so you can have some wisdom handed off with their product as it relates to a mobile church plant. Because the thing is, and this is an issue I have with those companies. Like I charge whatever you want to charge, right? But the problem is every church plant is so different. Like like you're going to get to these package conversations and you're going to have some limits with that package conversation. And that's where that consultant person is going to be invaluable because you're either going to run into a guy who's just looking to make a sale with one of his packages, or you're gonna talk to somebody who can say, hey, all right, look, here's our package, but what you really need is some of this and some of this from this larger pack. And they're going to be able to blend out a custom. The problem is when you go custom for most companies, it's double the price. Right. And it's like, okay, what are we doing here, right? Like, are we trying to help churches get planted, or are we just trying to make money off of churches? And again, I don't have a sampling here because we didn't use any of this.
Yeah.
But these are, I think, a guy that's maybe listening to this and you're thinking about going that route. Just have some rounds in the chamber where you can understand, who am I talking to? What's the consultancy that's happening? And then I would also be asking the question, are they trying to make money off of me? Because most of the time when they start talking about their business as it relates to your church, all you're doing is thinking about how they're helping expand your vision. And that's not what they're doing. They're just taking you for a ride and they're trying to sell you buy your own vision, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just, so I think they have a valuable space in helping churches get started, but at the same time, those things bother me, because
I could tell. So,
yeah.
so
And
I
I
think
didn't
you're.
even use them, like
No, and I didn't, and I imagine, just thinking back when I looked at it, I think it was a cost point. But also looking back, there was this time that it wouldn't have been just our size, especially that first year. It was
right.
me and my wife. Like, it wouldn't have made sense.
Yeah.
But
Same.
as we grew, I should have just spent the money,
Yeah.
or even to your point, I should just had the conversation, because maybe they would have come back and said, I don't know if this is, or they said, yeah, you could be doing this a lot better. And but you don't know until you ask. In fact, I think another point you're encouraging guys have at least reach out, get some input, see what they say.
Sure.
I would, in the same vein, and something that wouldn't cost you any money, is I'd ask other people who've done mobile church about
Right.
their setups and what they wish they had done different, which
Yes.
is essentially what you and I are doing here. Like, this
Yeah.
conversation is meant, if you're going into a mobile church setup, there's things we wish we had done differently. And so take this conversation just as input. But I'd reach out to others and say, hey, looking back on it, is there anything you feel like was unnecessarily burdensome, unnecessarily tedious, things that could have been streamlined, a setup that could have been more welcoming, a setup that could have facilitated the actual ministry more effectively or more efficiently? Those are all good questions to ask. You can't just roll up and say, well, we were set up like this when we were over here, and that just must be the way you set up church. That's what I did. I reproduced what I saw in North Carolina,
Right.
didn't question it, and it was not. I mean, even if
Yeah.
I kept the podium up, kept the podium in the room itself was not conducive to what we were trying to do. And I just
Yeah.
someone should have asked, or should push back. I should have asked someone.
Yeah.
So
And two, right, this goes back to like befriending people in your area, like because I know for sure, like I could talk about 6 church plants that are happening over the past like year and a half and on their way across Southern California, right? So probably something similar is happening in like every kind of geographical region in America right now, to include, whoever's listening to this podcast, where you're headed, right? And someone's probably 18 months ahead of you, 24
yeah.
months ahead of you, 36 months ahead of you, 9 months ahead of you, that you could just get a heads up. And that's really simple, by the way. You could find that on Facebook. So I have a buddy of mine that started a grant for what he calls seedling churches. And he
Nice.
just basically kind of created this thing where it's like based on the parameters of likes and impressions a church Facebook page gives you a sense of how big they are. And so you can track something like that to get a sense of who's doing what in your community, and then reach out to those people and just see like, hey, what was your story? Did you mobile set up? Did you not mobile set up? And get a sense of like, yeah, like you're saying, just reaching out, getting some wisdom on like, how did that go for you? What were some things you do differently? And just leaning into that.
And I think a great thing and you did this and I did not, and I wish I had, is you were storing stuff on site. And I wish
Yeah.
I had asked to store. We didn't have, especially at the beginning when it wasn't a ton and nothing super valuable.
Yeah.
I wish I had just asked, could I use some closet space for this, or
Yeah.
some cabinet space? And so again, if you're going to go mobile, there's something to be said for not having to pack everything in and out every week. Because we lived in a 3rd floor condo that
Ooh.
first couple years. So everything we did pack in, we had to take up 3 flights of stairs, down 3 flights of stairs, and so it was tedious just for the
Yeah,
pair of us to be
that's
doing all that.
crazy. And
Yeah,
I
so
really
stupid.
like me thinking through the asking who you're dealing with at the company level really comes like we bought a sound, we had to update our sound equipment one time, and we were like, okay, let's get a soundboard, some microphones, some receivers, all this sort of stuff. And that guy did a very, very good job of asking me a lot of questions and really getting a sense of like the whole picture, and then making some recommendations. And he didn't come out at an arm and a leg. And this guy had been in church planting. He had been a part of a church planting team. He had a lot of credentials from that space. And so when I was talking to him about like what our church looked like, where like we were in a gym, like all this stuff, like he was able to talk about like interference from metals and like all it's just stuff that was really specific to me that I had no knowledge base about.
Hmm.
And so I think like he was a huge help to me And I mean, we still have that sound equipment. We're not using it right now, but we can take that wherever, or I can help some other church planner and give it to them or whatever, but it's
See, that's yeah, we over the time in that space was doing the same again, upgrading and changing things out. And you made me just think of we kept that projector. It's old now. We've had to change out the bulb, but we've also kept the projector, and we've kept the sound system, and we've been able to use it in the way we're doing ministry now, and that's been good. So okay. Let me ask you this. We might have to bring this one down because I know there's another angle to this we wanted to talk about, but there's nothing to keep us from having that as another conversation. Do you know any? I was looking here on Amazon, and I don't even know what to look because nothing's popping up. Any books, resources outside of, we've mentioned something like a portable church, but actual books about doing mobile church setup. I know Launch, that I've mentioned before, by Nelson Searcy. He was setting up in a space that wasn't theirs in New York. And so he talks a little bit about that. And particularly, I think this what we were going to maybe jump into next time, about the teams and the volunteers and the people handing stuff off, and not one guy doing it. Because essentially it was me doing it, me and my wife, and it sounds like you and maybe a handful of others doing all the setup and taking ownership for the ministry. But anything else? Are you aware of any other resources? Because I can't.
No, I really don't think so. And I don't even want to say it's unfortunate, but it is a reality that most of the time when you get to that portion of a book about church planting, about making the space relevant and comfortable and all those things, I just think because guys that are writing those books know my situation is probably very unique to our church plant, which is very true. It's kind of pointless to try and write a chapter about, hey, here's the real practical how-tos to do that. So they tend to go very philosophical, right? Which is a lot of what we're talking about, make it as appropriate as you can, make it as welcoming as you can, make it as professional as you can. And those are all great points of advice, but there's just a lot to be said about the real practical stuff that you would need to think through as it relates to your church plant. Yeah. And I think that's just one of the things about church planting that is very, very tough, because while you and I have very similar startup stories, they are completely different, both because of where we were and who we ended up planting with, right? Who were kind of reaching. And so, I'm talking from a Southern California context, and I can tell you this, a guy that planted, 15 miles west of me would have a very similar thought process, but would have a completely different experience because he's within a completely different city. And so I probably a forum of planters maybe somewhere, but I don't even know where you would find that. So what I'm going to say, best advice I could give would be, I think what I said a little bit ago, and that is try to do the legwork if you're on your way to a city to figure out who's a little beyond you.
Yeah.
And I don't think it needs to be 5 years. I would try to
find. And that's true. That's true in every aspect, I think, of church planting. That's what discipleship is, right? You only need someone a couple steps ahead of you to help you get there. And think of that too. You don't need to be the expert.
Right.
So we're not certainly experts, but we're 12, 13 years ahead of guys just starting. So there's things that have been learned. And I think that's great advice. Are there some people that can point into it? That's what we hope this podcast is. That's what we hope this conversation is. It's just guys that have done it and looking back and saying, here's what I would do different. Here's what didn't work. So that's good.
And beyond that too, right? I think the reason why it's so important for you to get to know guys, apart from the wisdom that's there, is like building relationships and developing friendships within ministry. Because church planting, this is funny because we weren't really planning on going this direction, but I'll lean into this a little bit. Like we're working on kind of having some guys over in January that are literally across 50 miles within the state of California, right? They're all brand new within 2 years of planting, and they need each other. They might not know they need each other, but church planting is crazy lonely work. It's crazy hard work. I mean, really, it's an impossible work, when you really boil it down to. So have some people and some friends in ministry that can help give you some insights and a little bit of like a sounding board to bounce some stuff off of. But dude, when that thing blows up or that thing goes crazy or it succeeds or just bombs, like that, he's important for a lot more, in those moments.
Right.
And I think the knowledge base is important, but I think the relationship that you find that knowledge being poured in from is infinitely more valuable, so
It's good.
my two thoughts. But I don't know, I mean, what are we
Yeah.
at, 30, 40
Yeah.
minutes?
Yeah. We could wrap. Let's
I
stop this
was
here. I actually had forgotten that I had this scheduled. And so I had gotten dressed to go take a walk. And then
oh
my phone says, "Hey, you got to interview Isaac." And I was like, oh, man.
Unbelievable. Well, I was going to see if we could push this into a long form discussion about, volunteers.
I know you love going long, but I'm going to say we take, because we're, so the other side of this is how you're utilizing the space with the various pieces of the ministry. So think youth ministry, nursery, the teaching or preaching aspects, anything else even happening in the community where you're trying to use that space, and then how are you utilizing leaders and volunteers in it. And so there's a lot that can be said there, but I don't want to. I feel like it's a different side of the same coin. So we're going to stop there. I think this has been good. I want to be clear for all it is. I mean, mobile church, if you're doing it, it is work. It can be frustrating. There's days, especially here. I know probably not in California. There's days here when it's 0 degrees and snowing, and you got to carry all that stuff out to the car. Like I get it. No, you don't know what that's like. It's rough. But I enjoyed it. And just looking back on it, I feel like, man, there's so much more we could have done there. And so I want to encourage you, just what we've spoke here, just maybe have some good conversations, get some other people's opinions, press into those things, get some feedback. And what does it look like to maximize that space for these different areas?
Yeah, and then too, right? Because we're talking about mobile church, and maybe a little bit of this conversation has felt like, man, they're really downing mobile church, and
Again,
yeah,
but
like
big picture, I liked it. I
yeah.
liked.
What I would say to the guy who's in it, like I would just say enjoy it. Like I know that, like you're talking about, I mean, all those things, right? Like I guess I could say, yeah, it was really hot and we were moving some stuff around. There's a term in the military, embrace the suck, right?
There you go.
I'm just going to deal with this really nasty, uncomfortable thing, and I'm going to enjoy it because of where it's heading to. And what I don't mean by that is a permanent building, right?
Right.
So all I'm saying is enjoy the ride, move through it slowly, appreciate it, and really don't. I would just say try not to do too much more than what is comfortably doable, like from yourself, right?
Yeah.
You've got, if you're preaching, you've got to develop that. You've got to look for messages. You got to make disciples. You're meeting with people. You're doing some outreach and evangelisms. I would just say take a look around, and this will be good. This will segue into the next conversation. Is I would just say take a healthy look at the people around you that are committed to the cause like you are, and just think about the different ways that they could maybe take some things off to where you could do more in that mobile aspect with their contribution and with their buy-in, right? So because I know there's some guy out there, he's doing what I was doing, man. He is picking up the bulletins, he's grabbing the connection cards, he's rehearsing for music, he's helping put out the carpet, he's helping put out the chairs, he's helping set out the nursery. He's thinking and praying over his message, he's thumbing through the slides for one final time to do spelling check errors, and then he's got to and then he's got to tear it all down and go home and do the audio recording, editing, right? Yep. For the podcast, and then he's got to go back that night and preach again. Okay. So so don't do that. But if you're in some version of that, like I would really take a look at, and look, I would pick top 3, right? What are the 3 things that of all these things I'm doing, that if I stop doing all of them except these 3, we could still move the needle forward each weekend, right? Because that's what it's all about. At the end of the day, on a weekend analysis, it's did we move the needle forward? And that doesn't mean numbers, that doesn't mean attendance. It means whatever your vision is and the mission you're working towards, did you move the needle forward, right? That's all you're trying to do. And there's probably some things that you don't need to be doing that you could look at people around you and say, hey guys, let's start divvying some stuff out. So but enjoy it, I guess is what I would say. I certainly don't want to come across like, yeah, wait until you're not mobile anymore. Wait until
No, bro. Again, hindsight, I wish I had enjoyed it more. I wish we'd utilize more, especially the so little money involved for Britain. I mean, I wish I had just recognized, hey, we're doing ministry at a very low cost. And so anyway, that's okay. We're rehashing some stuff. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope this has been encouraging to you. That is certainly our heart and our hope. And if we can be that voice for you, you want to kind of talk about maybe you're stepping into mobile church, you do mobile church. You can reach out to me or Isaac. I've shared our contact information before. You can always respond just to the podcast wherever whatever platform you're listening on. If it has been helpful, man, please share it. If you're a church planter, you got a team, or you know a church planter, man, please pass this along to them or share it on your social media. Leave us a rating or review. That always helps other people find it. But man, thank you so much for listening to this episode. This has been Everything I Did Wrong as a Church Planter, a million-part series. My name is Logan Wolf. I'm in Utah. I was joined today by my friend Isaac Morin. He's in California. Thank you so much.